Friday, August 15th, and that means it's time for another episode of Nonprofit Conversations. I'm your host, Cecilia Supp. I am the principal and founder of Rogue Tulips Consulting. We work exclusively with nonprofits. And I would like to say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to our global audience. Thanks to everyone for joining us this week. We are so excited, and I keep saying we again because I'm so used to working with my friend Agnes Amos Coleman on this show. I will eventually get to saying I. But let's call it the royal we. We here at Rogue Tulips are so excited to have Mike Jacka and Bryant Richards back for their great interactions and insights into nonprofit topics. So this week, we're going to be talking about emerging technology and innovation in the nonprofit environment. We're going to touch on some other things like the different tools and grants that you may not be aware of as well. But before we dive into the topic, I'm going to throw it over to Bryant and ask him to say hello to the audience and introduce himself.
Thanks, Cecilia, and thanks for having me on again. This is great. It's great to be here with Mike Jacka. My name is Bryant Richards. I am the director for the Center of Intelligent Process Automation and an associate member of the faculty for accounting and finance at Nichols College. We have been exploring lots of emerging technologies over the years and bringing it to the business community.
Great. And thank you, Bryant. And he always has great advice, especially for nonprofits. And let's thank you, Bryant. And let's go over to Mike and ask Mike to introduce himself to the audience and tell us a little bit about himself.
Thank you. I'm Mike Jacka. Glad to be here. I've been working in internal audit for lots of years, over 30 years, the majority of that with Farmers Insurance and their internal audit department. Involved in a lot of different things, but most recently have my own gig going where I'm just doing a part-time thing as speaking, presenting, training, those types of things. And I've also been working with Bryant recently quite a bit on how internal audit and RPA can work together, how internal audit can use RPA, work together as a tool.
Well, that's great. So that means you already have synergy. We know that from having you on previous episodes, but that means you're building that synergy out. So this should be a great conversation. So let's start back over to Bryant. So Bryant, you give a lot of advice to nonprofits regarding innovation, but I think we need to kind of do an initial step of talking about some of the opportunities and grants that might be out there for nonprofits when it comes to technology and innovation that they may not be aware of.
Sure. Thanks, Cecilia. I think it's important for nonprofits to hear that there is a lot of tech organizations that are really intent on supporting them. We all recognize how important nonprofits are to the world, and I think the tech companies are really putting their money, where their intentions are. And there's lots of things you can explore, whether it's getting free software, free headsets, free grants. One of the ones that I think is really sort of an easy no-brainer is simply exploring the Google AdWords grant. You apply for it, you pretty much get it as long as you have a decent website and can support it. And it's up to $10,000 a month of AdWords that you can use to start, having people drive traffic to your websites for various, whether it's outreach or donations or things like that.
That's incredible. $10,000 a month. That if my math is correct, about $120,000 a year. So that would build out any nonprofit's budget.
Significantly.
So Mike, you're more of a guy who talks about innovation, maybe more than the actual tools themselves. But do you think that this kind of thing, these kind of grants, really do support innovation, or do you think that's more tactical?
For all of the above. Innovation requires a mindset of willing to accept the new and the different that's going on there and figuring out how to apply it. And so with these grants, with these opportunities, now not only can you have the ideas, but you can begin the implementation. I'll use Big Bang as an example, where you have Sheldon, who's the theoretical scientist, and he can never really do anything, whereas Leonard is the one who develops the tests that prove it. This brings it all together. You can come up with all the brilliant ideas in the world. You can see the opportunities that technology brings to you. Now, these are opportunities to actually use those tools, develop them, and make a significant difference in the way your organization works.
And there's some other things, though, that I always think of with emerging technology, because technology is a tool. Obviously, I think we all know that. And that tool's always evolving, or there's a new tool on the block. I mean, I'm one of the people who remember web crawler. For you youngsters out there, that used to be a browser, but now you use the verb Google. So things change, but they serve the same purpose in the end. It's just the tools get better. But then there's some of the things, and I'll throw it over to Bryant and get his input on this. There's some of these things like cybersecurity. The problem with technology tools is that other people can hack them. So, what are some of the conversations or advice you might have with nonprofits, Bryant, about that, about the need for cybersecurity?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I appreciate the question. Like Mike, I spent a lot of time in internal audit and had my hand in a lot of cybersecurity reviews and whatnot. What's interesting about cybersecurity is a lot of folks think it's about the hardware or the software, and sometimes it is, but a large majority of breaches, upwards to 80%, depending on what statistic you hear about, comes from something they call social engineering. The
Oh,
weak link is the people. So password protection, storing your passwords in a safe place. One demonstration was done where they showed how easily they could access passwords from institutions by simply going online and pulling them from various, exposed areas. So some really strong practices about just, who has access and how that's monitored and what you click on is almost always more important than how robust your tools are.
wow, that is a great point. And you reminded me of a friend of mine used to do marketing for a cybersecurity company. And she said, you would be shocked how many people, when we're testing the employees, click on the phishing link. I was like, oh my gosh. And my husband the other day called me in the other room and said, do you think this is a real email? And I said, well, who is it from? And he's like, well, it says it's from, some company he actually does business with. I said, well, look at the email address. What does the email address say? It says gail@gmail.com. Do you really think that company would send you an email from there? So I would say, no, delete it. Okay. Yeah. And so it is. It really is the people factor, which is so much of nonprofit. So, Mike, what is your take on that about the people factor when it comes to these things?
Well, Brian's hit the nail on the head on that one. And the one thing that you also mentioned, it's amazing. I don't have the stats at hand. Of course, 62.5% of all stats are made up. So, but so much of it comes from people in the office clicking on those same links, building those same things. Social media is a hotbed for these types of opportunities, even people building complete fake LinkedIn addresses that have all the names and addresses of a company. So you think you are working with that company. And again, an employee of a company saying, oh, this is my CEO, I can go to this particular one. Fake websites, fake Twitter accounts, all these types of things are how first the personal on your own personal side, it causes such an issue, but it is used within an organ. The minute you click on that within an organization, all the firewalls in the world will not protect you from that. So it is the issue in this is partly the technology, but it's training, and just reminding people again and again and again, this is how it really happens.
Well, and gosh, you have made so many thoughts just run through my head with saying that because my blog post last week for my website and in our weekly newsletter, Rogue Speak, was called Lazy Thinking Undermines Everything. Because this is a thing, like I've been saying to people for years, you can avoid a lot of these scams online by just thinking it through. Do you actually have a bank account at the Royal Bank of Scotland? It's very simple questions like that. And to your point, Mike, oh my gosh, this happened to me a couple of years ago. I got an email from Avis Rent-A-Car, and I am going ahead and saying their name because I contacted their fraud department and let them know this happened. Somebody built what you just said, Mike, a mirror image of the Avis rental car website with my account. And they were trying to charge me for a trip that happened a year before.
Yeah.
And so you read through that and you're like, what are they talking about? And then I start looking deeper because you can also look at IP addresses. You can reveal the IP code, those numbers as opposed to just the web link. So those kind of simple things. We're kind of going over into cybersecurity, and I wanted to be like more forward thinking and exciting on this, but gee, we have to have those basic things in place before we move forward. But let's get to the more fun part about emerging tech and innovation. And so, Mike, I'm going to stick with you for a second. What are some of the innovative things you see coming for nonprofits when it comes to some new technologies out there?
Well, I'm going to beat the same drum I did before, which is just the RPA, robotic process automation. I think it's one of those incredible opportunities for everybody because it is relatively easy to learn when it comes to the programming aspects of it. It is relatively inexpensive. Most anybody, and Bryant can speak to this a little better, what anybody can use, but it is a hotbed for people who are innovators. Bryant and I just did a presentation at the International Conference in Chicago, and there are a couple of people in there who have already doing some amazing things, just building a few bots, doing a few things, going out and going directions that none of us would have thought of. It's this wide open Wild West opportunity to be a developer and do something different. And I think that's where it comes in. I've even talked to a couple of internal auditors who are already trying to figure out not how to audit with it, but how to make their own processes within internal audit better. So a tool, an opportunity in there. There's a lot of other ones out there. That's the one I'm seeing the most of right now.
So, Bryant, let's go over to you. You're a bit of an expert on automation. Can you build on Mike's comments?
I'd love to, and I agree with everything Mike said. There are a lot of opportunities there. The interesting thing about nonprofits is they may not necessarily, especially small ones, have large opportunities, but they don't need to have large, complicated opportunities to have success. We're seeing very simple, straightforward automations. For instance, just collecting data, maybe formatting it, maybe reporting on it regularly, maybe even comparing it. Things that are very simple to do after a small number of hours of training that can be done in multiple places. So you can create one bot, which who knows, maybe it takes you a week or two to get it right. And then after that, you can just keep applying it in different places. I think nonprofits should really consider sort of the possibility of getting small wins with automation. And I think if you don't mind, I think what's important in my experience with a lot of nonprofits is we talk about cybersecurity and we talk about other challenges, and a lot of it comes down to resources and the amount of hats people wear and how hard they work. Well, it's easy to be social engineered if you're trying to do 15 jobs all the time and you're rushing around and trying to get everything done. I think automation and this path of using emerging technology in a way that's meaningful and makes sense to these smaller organizations can start freeing up those resources to do things more thoughtfully and be better, and even have the time to innovate more.
Well, and I think that is an excellent point. I have spent my entire career in the nonprofit profession in one role or another. And you're absolutely right, Bryant. I think a lot of people are distracted because we are small staff. We tend to get assigned extra work, that great line in your job description and other duties as assigned, which blows the rest of it out of the water. And I think that's a really good point. And a lot of times I think that nonprofit staffs will look at something and say, oh, I don't have the time for that. And my response is, how can you not take the time? How can you not set aside the time to do that? Because I also see, and this isn't an innovation thing or an emerging tech thing, but this is an issue with technology. Nonprofits will buy a beautiful integrated system that does all kinds of things, and they use maybe a quarter of it, and they don't leverage what they already have. So that is a way, I think, building what you said, Bryant, people could apply the automation and make their lives a little bit easier, and then have that time for innovation. Mike, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, what I was thinking is the other part about this that is often overlooked is so much of what we try to do in technology, the IT department has to worry about and has to be doing. The other thing about so much of the stuff out here now is it is so easy and so simple. Even a regular employee can do it. And
I can do it. Even I can do it.
Yeah, even Brian can do it. I will throw out, this is an internal auditor saying, oh, who cares about the controls? But it is an opportunity for people to develop. I think in the 80s, the term was a skunk works that just builds out of nowhere and builds this type of stuff. And the opportunity then for the individual, the opportunity for the department is if they get into it, they start doing those small wins that Brian talks about. The wins become bigger and bigger. They become a center of excellence for the rest of the organization. They start getting those opportunities and those things that, okay, now suddenly we're given more money and we can do more with it, or we train the rest of it and they become the hotbed for the rest of the organization to catch on how these all can work and how they can be used.
And then that cross training within the organization, that model, I love that. Innovation leads to modeling excellence. is one way to look at it.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that is fantastic point. So I want to throw it back over to Bryant and see, what other things do you see coming down the pike, as we like to say, for emerging tech for nonprofits?
Sure. I would say we're hearing a lot of these, these words: artificial intelligence, automation, virtual reality. I say all of them are still coming. What's interesting, and what I really encourage, again, sort of the smaller organizations to explore, is these things are coming in forms that are easier to apply for simple use cases, and that's what I'd encourage them to do. Your example, Cecilia, of buying that great system and only using a little of it is such a almost a cliche in so many organizations. But when you don't have the time to invest the resources, go get the small, inexpensive, low risk wins and build off of them. I mean, you can be in a virtual reality system that allows you to just interact with your customers or your stakeholders better, with very little money at all and very little understanding of how to use it. You can be building automations in 2 weeks, spending $3 a month on the tool. AdWords is free. Somebody just needs to understand how to work the AdWords. A lot of these tools are getting very accessible for a lot of us to use. And I think
And
that's really the key point.
and there's so many. You're so right. There are so many things. Mike, did you want to chime in on that?
No, no, no. Well, actually, I will throw something I wasn't planning on, but yeah, let me throw something in. Because the term Bryant and I, there's a term out there that Bryant and I are using a lot now. We didn't make this one up, but it's a citizen developer. And it's the idea, it's not IT, it's about people within departments. Way back in the 90s, there's anybody out there that remembers WYSIWYG and Lotus 123? There probably isn't. But I was one, I could program in it. And I was doing database programs in that for our internal audit department. There was no term for it then, but that really was, I was building tools that we could use from a technological standpoint. And that's really what a citizen developer is. You're sitting in the department. You're in that part of it, and you know what it is they really need, and you have the tools to start building it.
And that is a great example of initiative as well. I think a lot of innovation has come from initiative. Somebody has to take that risk and say, I wonder what happens if I push that button. And hopefully you can undo it if it goes wrong. So, because that's really what I think really, because you actually made me remember something from when I was in undergraduate school. For some reason, I ended up becoming the teaching assistant for this computer class. And we had a whole room full of Apple IIe's, if you guys remember what that looked like. And we had all these older people. I was like maybe 19 at the time. We had, older people, returning students. Our school is known for people 25 and up going back to undergrad school. And they were all afraid to press the buttons. And I said, why are you not pressing the button? What if I break it? And like, the only way you're going to break this computer is if you push it off the table and slam it into the floor. Push the button. You're not going to break anything. And I think a lot of us have that ingrained in us, that we're afraid we're going to do it wrong. Well, you know what? You might, but there's very few things in a computer and technology that you can't undo outside of wiping your hard drive or ransomware or something like that. So go ahead and experiment, everyone, and figure out what you have. Even if it's a basic thing, like a basic automation I use on my own is I have a social pilot for my social media messaging and marketing. And I just sit down and I program it out. I sat down, I just set aside a couple hours one day earlier this summer and I scheduled messaging out through September. And I don't have to worry about it now. I always have messages going out. And so you always look active, but you don't have to worry about it and your messages are consistent. And that's a real basic one that I think we all could look at. So we're getting near the end of our episode. This is a bigger topic, I know, that we could dive into. So we will definitely have you both back. I would love to dig into virtual reality with the two of you on a future episode and get your insights on that. Just a little preview. I'm not a person who's real crazy about virtual reality because I think we have enough trouble dealing with our real reality, but that's just me. I know there's other things about that. But as we're looking at emerging technology. There's options out there for grants and low fee tools that Bryant has mentioned. There's becoming a model of excellence that Mike has mentioned, which I think is an excellent point. There's leveraging what we already have. So, Mike, what would be your closing thought on this topic? for this week, and how could people get in touch with you if they wanted to talk more about that?
I think my closing thought builds exactly on what you said, and kind of wraps the whole thing around. This is about innovation. This is about doing something different. And innovation fails in the face of fear. You can't be afraid to do something. You've got to go out there and try it, and you will fail. And that's one of the things, again, coming from the internal audit world, we don't like failure. Part of why I think a lot of internal audit departments need to be doing more about getting around that. But creativity is a good start. Innovation is a piece of it. And all of these are brand new tools that give you the opportunity. Go explore them. Go find out about them. The first few you try may not work, but that's what this is all about, going and exploring and finding something new and different and better to do.
And how could people get in touch with you if they wanted to learn more?
Yeah, well, I'm at mjacka, Jacka, at fpacs, fpacts.com. But you can also reach out and get me at LinkedIn, or if you're really bored, you can follow me on Twitter at Figre, Figre.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Mike. And now, Bryant, what is your closing thought, and how could people get in touch with you for follow-up?
I appreciate that, Cecilia. As I listen to Mike, I think to myself, maybe the message I have is that innovation can start with a lowercase I, especially when you're in an environment that's pressed for so much time. Let's not try to think of it as necessarily this really intimidating process. Let's go after simple, small, easy wins using emerging technology that people have already even demonstrated works in certain cases. Let's leverage the use cases for stuff that already exists out there. We don't have to involve the IT departments. We don't have to, we can minimize the risk. Let's go get some little wins and start building our journey that way. I think that's a really, really important message to the audience. For those who want to get in touch with me, I can be reached at bryant.richards@nichols.edu. And of course, you can always find me on LinkedIn.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you both, Bryant and Mike. You are two of our most quotable guests, as well as two of our favorites. So we look forward to having you back. We have to go rogue for now, but we'll be back next week with another exciting episode of Nonprofit Conversations. If you'd like to learn more about Rogue Tulips Consulting and how we can help your organization bloom outside the box, check out our website, roguetulips.com. If you are a current CAE candidate or holding the CAE currently and need to get some more education for your renewal, check out our education program, the 501c League. You can find that website at the501cleague.net. On behalf of myself, Mike, and Bryant, thanks for joining us. See you next time.